Hel- Hello, everybody. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today, I have with me Jonathan Shah, Iggy B,
Hello.
and myself, David D, with Hannah Solo, talking about epilepsy and overcoming challenges and
Building support,
uh,
David.
building support. So,
Thank you
Iggy,
very much for that, David. So, yeah, please like and share
please
and
like and share.
join in the conversation. Anyways, welcome, Hannah. Welcome back to CripChat. But,
Oh, I'm
of course,
so happy to see all your amazing faces.
yeah, it's always good to see you too, Hannah. So, today we'll be talking about epilepsy awareness. So, before we do begin, tell us a little bit about yourself, Hannah.
So yeah, I live in Sydney, and I am a disability activist. And you guys met me with Disability Pride, but before Disability Pride, I actually had started a group called the Sydney Epilepsy Jacaranda Club because I'm epileptic. It's one of my lovely disabilities. And not the only one, but the one we're talking about tonight. So yeah, and I've kind of done a lot to kind of support members and things through all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I've had my dad's epileptic, so I inherited it, and I've had it since I was 25.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Hannah. And yeah, welcome to the show. So this episode will focus on epilepsy, epilepsy awareness, but also we'll be discussing ableist attitudes, grassroots support group, and also the benefit of the community in coming together and supporting peace with epilepsy. So Hannah, share us a bit of insight into epilepsy, highlighting its dynamic and unpredictable nature.
Well, yeah, I think epilepsy, in many ways, kind of is an extreme example of what everyone with every disability goes through a lot, which is the idea that ableist people think that if you could do something on Monday, you have to be able to do it on Tuesday. And you're not disabled if you can occasionally do something. And epilepsy is this extreme example. So I've had people say to me, like, epilepsy is only a disability for the 5 minutes that you're having the actual seizure. Or and for quite a long time, you weren't actually able to get NDIS with epilepsy because it wasn't considered permanent.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And,
Despite the fact that
and,
go on.
I've got a friend, he used to be able to drive everywhere until he became epileptic.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to drive
Yeah.
no
So
more.
if you have one
They
seizure
wouldn't give
in
him a
12
driver's
months,
license.
you lose your license. So I haven't driven a car in like 15 years.
Oh wow!
And many of our members in the Jacaranda Club have lost their jobs. There's a lot of that. I mean, that reaction that you get as a disabled person of like terror, like, oh my gosh, disabled person.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. With
that's right.
epilepsy,
Yeah,
it's a fun reaction, but with epilepsy, it's backed up by work health and safety. They're like, oh, So I had one lovely lady in the club tell me that the work health and safety officer told her that her presence in the workplace was a hazard because if she had a seizure, it could traumatize the people around her. So, like,
oh,
that level of ableism, I feel like is not as blatant, but here it's like your existence is a trauma. Your existence is a
Is
trauma.
that still happening nowadays? Wouldn't there be like support to support people that had epilepsy?
What it like? There are people around to support now, but this story is only like less than 5 years old. So this particular lady lived in a rural area. She had to give up her career and move to a city, which is very common. That's why I moved to Sydney, because I could no longer drive. So I had to move on public to an area with public transport. And she lost her job, and one of the things I said was, you can't, your existence is a trauma risk. Because you might upset people.
You might upset people.
Yeah, if you have a seizure, they might be traumatized. So you being like, because you can't stop being epileptic. So essentially, we can't have you here because your danger, like your disability is a trauma risk. Does that sound ableist to you?
Yeah.
That's too ableist for me. Too ableist.
But not at all uncommon. And so you get a really weird thing. I think every disability is dynamic. Like I say to people who don't have disabilities, I'm like, okay, so if you're having a bad day, can you function at the same level as if you weren't having a bad day? And they're like, no, of course not. And I'm like, why do you get annoyed when someone uses a wheelchair on Monday and not on Tuesday and say that they're not real? So we all go through that issue. But with epilepsy, it's more extreme because you have things like you can't get NDIS because it's not permanent. That's changed now. But particularly when NDIS used to have to assess you on your best day, like that was a really big issue. You get, ableist comments like, you get people like saying, well, you can't have a problem because you function normally all the time. It's like, well, you don't. Like after a seizure, you don't just snap back to normal. If you're having regular seizures, your function is drastically reduced. It can take me 2 weeks to recover from a grand mal seizure.
Wow.
Well, you feel like you've been hit by a train. It's like horrible. And like you can also hallucinate. So I actually have had psychotic episodes just triggered by seizures.
Hannah.
Yeah.
There's a famous footballer. I don't know if you know.
Yeah. I've got a friend who's a really big fan of his. My friend James, who wanted to come on, is a big fan of that footballer.
Oh, nice.
Wally Lewis.
Are you talking about Wally Lewis? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, my friend James is a really good example of what epilepsy can do. So James, he now, just from epilepsy, he doesn't have anything else. We don't actually know the full cause. It's either a brain injury from a seizure or a side effect of his medication or both. But he now has to use a walker, and he's also lost word finding ability. So he can't, it's called aphasia, which is where like you know what you want to say, but you can't remember the word. And he has to walk around with a crash helmet on. So we have all sorts of members like of the group. But those are my favorite stories. Your disability is a trauma risk in our workplace, and I've got some fun ones of my own, but there's all sorts of fun stuff you can talk about epilepsy, but just in terms of the ableism, I think that its dynamic nature, it really brings to the fore that stupid misconception that people have, that disabilities have to be the same all the time. And that idea
right. Go ahead, Hannah. Sorry.
No, go on.
As I was saying, Wally Lewis.
Yeah, I've met the Purple Wiggles brother has epilepsy. That's someone else that's an epilepsy advocate, the Purple Wiggle. So I've met him.
I know.
I feel like that's the most famous person anyone could. Like, he's really famous.
Yeah.
What about Wally Lewis? Wally Lewis was known as the king of Queensland.
Yeah, yes, Wally Lewis.
And
I've got
he
some friends who are really big fans of that. Like my friend James, the one I was telling you about. He's kind of keeps a catalogue of famous
he
people with
played
epilepsy.
he played football and hit his epilepsy. He probably would have had seizures on the field.
Well,
but
so
he
some
wouldn't show it.
seizure, not all seizures make you fall down. That's a misconception.
Yeah.
Some see like it's just think of your brain as like a computer with lots of programs. And if the whole computer freezes and shuts down, that's like a grand mal seizure. But if one of the programs freezes, that's like a different type of seizure. So I
The
get what
other
are
two
called,
Yeah.
and there's all sorts of types. So
I
if
also
some
have
of
a
his
friend.
seizures, you wouldn't have known if he was having it on the field because you can't tell from the outside. Mine, I have these ones, I call them zombie seizures because basically my consciousness shuts off, but I just keep walking around. And that can be really weird because like I've actually stepped between a train and the platform before because I tried to get on the train.
Oh wow.
So they're not safe. But
Yeah.
that's something that can happen. Like, yeah, they're called focal dyscognitive or focal impaired awareness seizures.
That's pretty interesting. Now, thanks for sharing. And we lost David again. No, all good. Yeah, so, and yeah, we go to the next question, John. So, yeah, when we talk about challenges that I encountered in accessing support, what are the challenges that I encountered in accessing support for formal organizations like Epilepsy Association and also other online platforms such as Facebook groups?
Yeah, so I mean, I love so this is my I mean, I know this will come as a shock, but there's a lot of disability organizations that don't like empowering disabled people. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. Not at all.
So this organization,
Well, not really.
no, I didn't think so. So I felt like I needed support from other people with epilepsy. And so I rang the Epilepsy Association in New South Wales, which is called Epilepsy Action. And I said, hey, I want to start a support group, right? And the response, this is hilarious. They said, we don't have anything to do with support groups. We don't help with those. But if you want to run a fundraiser for us, we have lots of stuff. We can totally help you out with that. Would you like that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
really,
the focus is on them, pretty much.
This is like crazy. And they're like, yeah. I mean, I have a better relationship with them now. I have a much better relationship. That's because, so we had this program that we set up, helping epileptic people in hospitals. And when I pitched it to them, they just came out with all the things that were wrong with it. And so as a group, we got together and did a pilot ourselves. And I mean, the story of those is quite good because what happened was I went to the hospital. And again, I'm sure this is something so many people with disabilities can relate to. I was desperately ill, right? But I was having a complication of epilepsy that is not, well, look, frankly, it's not that uncommon, but apparently it's uncommon enough for them to not know what it was at the emergency room. Hands up, anyone with a disability who's been through that crap.
Oh yeah, many times.
Exactly. So, I went in and asked for help. They had no idea what they were doing. In my complaint, I sent them a medical journal article. It took me 2 seconds to find, describing exactly what I was going through, but apparently nobody had read it. Anyway, and it was just the worst days of my life because it was just horrible. And then after that, I finally got admitted.
And I've got a question.
Yes.
Sorry, that. Yeah, go
When
ahead,
you have
Dave.
when you have an epileptic fit, are
Mhm.
you aware of your surroundings?
Depends on the type. The one where you fall down and start shaking that everyone knows about, no.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other ones, yes. Because it depends on the
Because
program that's jammed.
I've got a
So,
friend that always used to have epileptic fits. He was closing the gate, locking it up. He had an epileptic fit, and I didn't realize he had one. And my mate wanted to take him back home. He goes, "No, I'll walk her home." Because
yeah,
apparently
no, I do that after a
you
seizure
can't
as
control your
well. Like,
bladder.
look, there's a period where you where I honestly can't tell you because I don't remember it, but I'm behaving as if I'm fully aware, but I have no memory. And apparently, yeah, you can get pretty belligerent. Like people be like, no, you need to go home. You're really sick. And like, I'm not sick. Wow. I don't know. That's what I've
Yeah,
heard.
but apparently the reason why he didn't want to be taken home is because when you have the epileptic fit, your bladder releases sometimes.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And also that, like, you also, yeah, you can become, like, you can have fecal incontinence as well. So, because every muscle in your body,
Just
like, goes
releases.
in, it contracts to its maximum amount. This is in a grand mal seizure, and then releases to its maximum amount. So, yeah. So then, like, so yeah, it's not uncommon.
Understood.
It's pretty much a thing. So it's fun. It's a fun fact, fun aspect, but it's just something that you deal with. Or like I've been known to throw up and then breathe it back in and get pneumonia because your cough reflex, like you're like, well, it's fairly obvious, like it happened. So I had like, and chemical pneumonia is not really fun. So yeah, there's lots of fun things that can happen. Most of the
So
time,
how
you
we
just
gonna get
fall
people
over and
aware
hurt yourself.
about epilepsy, and are they? How can you notify? How they sort of?
Well,
Have
I
like
started my own.
something that you can notify who's got epilepsy if they do have
Well, you
epilepsy.
can't tell. One of my friends in the Jacaranda Club
Sometimes
made
you can
this
swallow your
hilarious.
tongue.
Nah, that's a myth. You can't swallow your tongue. Don't put anything in an epileptic. If you put your fingers in their mouth so that they'll bite them off. Like you really don't want to do that.
Oh wow.
Like if you want to keep your fingers, don't put them in their mouth.
You know one. Give me
Door,
don't
it's
forget
like,
about.
pardon?
I
Don't
don't
put
know.
anything in their mouth.
Yeah, don't put your finger in it. That's a no. Don't do
No.
it.
Well, if you want to, like, if you don't like your fingers and you think they're too long, and you want them cut, then put them in their mouth. Otherwise, don't. Because you've got to remember that the amount of energy, like that, your body is like that. The jaw clench that you get during a seizure is the absolute maximum amount of muscle. So it's not a good idea. Yeah, and that's why you feel like you've been hit by a train. But yeah,
So,
no, I mean,
so
for
it's
me,
like giving it's like giving the engine full throttle and
exactly.
then put it in reverse.
So you basically you provide similar first aid to what you do for an unconscious person. It's pretty much the same first aid. The only thing that is probably a little bit different is that it's a good idea to time the seizure, because if it goes for more than 10 minutes, it's considered a very serious medical emergency. So the ambulances, when they come, or the medical professionals, will be interested in how long the seizure lasted. And the other thing is, if the person seems like they're okay after the seizure, they're not necessarily okay. You don't want to leave them alone, no matter how much they say they're okay. But if you know the epileptic person, find out what they want to do beforehand, because what happens is you often get the ambulance called and it's a real pain in the backside because, you know, like, I mean, we all have ambulance insurance because otherwise people call an ambulance, it drives you to the hospital. The hospital's like, we can't help you. Go home.
You haven't paid.
You're like, well, that was
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. You're like, so, I mean, I get that most people have to do that and it's better to be safe than sorry. But the epileptic person will probably know what they need. So if you've got a friend with epilepsy, just say, do you need me to call an ambulance or not? And they might say, nah, I'm fine. Just like not after the seizure. Don't ask them for anything after a seizure. They're completely like, you know, off with the fairies. But
yeah, so you gotta if you got epilepsy, warn them first, and then tell them if you need anything.
Yeah, look, some of the things that I
do
like,
this.
I got very good at being prepared. So I have my hospital bag, which is like a bag with my medication, because I don't know about the rest of you. Who's a regular hospital person? Just me? No?
Yeah. No.
So
And I don't like the hospital, to be honest.
Oh, well, lucky you. But they never get your medication right. Like, you know, it can be prescribed by a doctor at that hospital and they'll still stuff it up. So
And that's one of the reasons I hate hospitals, man. They never get it right.
Never. They know nothing. So I have all my own stuff, like my own material, like anything that I want. So I can ask someone, I can say, I'm at the hospital, bring me the bag. And the bag will have everything in it.
Okay, cool. So, yeah.
And then, you know, like other things like spare underwear and, you know, a book to read, things like that. Because it's quite, you know, it's quite traumatizing. You wake up and you're lucky if you had the clothes you were wearing on. And you're just like, where the hell am I? But it was those traumas that I transformed into the group. So I started the group and, yeah, that was the response. Like, we don't support groups. And then I feel like sometimes there's a lot of competition among disabled people because so many of us are being forced to make our disability our identity and project, like, you know, and sort of we hope to make it into a career. Like, you know, so a lot of the Facebook groups for epileptic people, they won't let anyone else advertise anything on their Facebook group. Like, they're like, no, it's not our, like, you know, one of them, they don't hold events. But if I put my event on their group, they're like, they'll take it down. And I'm just like, okay. But, like, yeah, so I'm like, aren't we on the same side? Don't we care about each other?
And that's what peace support's all about.
Pardon?
Sorry, man. I was just saying, that's what peace support is all about, you know?
Well,
supporting our peers.
So. But then, you know, I think it's because, like, you know, knowing one of the Facebook groups, for example, I know is run by at least one of the founders can't get a job because of her epilepsy. So, like, you know, I think she's pretty protective of this project that she's got that, you know, and I get that. I can understand that. But I think, like, you know, having face-to-face peer support groups is really good because, like, you know, when our friends, I've had someone, so I was at the hospital and I was on the ketogenic diet for epilepsy because that's actually what it was invented for. Like, it's not a weight loss tool. It actually stops you having seizures. Like 50% of people get a 50% reduction in their seizures. Yeah. Like, not for everyone, but it can dramatically reduce seizures for half of the people with epilepsy. So I'm in the hospital for epilepsy and they won't give me ketogenic food. And I'm like, well, I'm here for seizures and you won't give me food that stops my seizures. That's really bad. So then someone in the group just popped in with ketogenic food, like, hi, here's my food. Or like someone had, like, was in lockdown for COVID and needed a rat test and I was able to bring it round to them. Well, I wasn't. someone I live with who has a car was able to, because I can't drive. Another time, like a friend of ours had just recently lost the capacity to walk unaided, and they hadn't really got to the point where they'd adjusted around it. So, you know, there was that period where he was really, really stuck in his house because he didn't have, he hadn't like got a scooter yet. He hadn't really learned to walk well with his, and so there was really the only people that could get in to see him and spend time with him and were this peer group, because, you know, the system hadn't caught up yet, but it kind of sucks to be him while he's waiting. So we all just packed our stuff up and went to the cafe next to his house and brought him down, and I think that's the kind of situation where a face-to-face peer support group is really good. And that horrible experience I had, one of the problems was I was stuck in acute care for 2 days without any supplies, and so we as a group created a peer care pack system where we pitched it to Epilepsy Action, and they basically didn't like it, but they like it now. Now that we did it ourselves. So we piloted it ourselves. We bought the materials with our own money, and we packed these little packs of stuff that we would want in the emergency room, like, you know, a phone charger. That's a really good thing to have if you end up in the emergency room. And then we packed them up and we wrapped them with a little letter from like a member of the group saying, I have epilepsy too. I understand this is a really traumatic experience, but we're thinking of you. And then I packed them all in a suitcase and basically traipsed around Sydney looking for hospitals to take them. And eventually broke in. I actually broke into the RPA neurology ward. Like I snuck in to the locked ward. Well, I didn't break in. I snuck in and demanded to see the nurse in charge. And because people there know me, like I've actually been a patient there, unfortunately, too often, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, we'll. And so that's how we got them into RPA. And, you know, people love them because you just, like, they're such a, it's the emotional as well as the practical support, like a hairbrush. And then, yeah. And
it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, it was so good because I'd had this horrible experience that was just so terrifying at the time. And through the peer care thing, I changed it into what I could do for other people, and it totally became healing. And then another friend was also like half lucid because she was having a seizure, like, and she'd had a seizure, so she was half there, but she knew she needed to get to the hospital, which is what happened to me. But I turned up at the hospital and they had no idea what they were doing or whatever, and everything just went to hell. But I was able to walk her through getting herself to the hospital over the phone. Like, I'm like, okay, you know, let's make sure that you put your clothes on. Let's make sure that we pack our stuff. Okay, now we're going to go to the hospital. Like, so whereas I didn't have anyone to do that for me. And I knew what I also knew from the inside, what state of mind she was in. So, yeah, I mean, this is a good story because you've got that terrible ableism, like, of like, oh, we won't help you start a peer support group, but if you want to run a fundraiser, I couldn't get over that one. I'm just like, whatever. But now they fund our peer care packs because we piloted ourselves and proved that it was effective. So now they're willing to pay for it. So, yay.
Good job.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's an interesting. I think epilepsy really brings some aspects of ableism to the fore, like that kind of dynamic aspect, you know. And if you only have seizures once a year, you still can't drive every day. But as far as most people, I mean, that's just a really simple example, you know. For a lot of people, it's a lot worse. Like, they're constantly walking around in a state of like fog because they've had a seizure, or or they have to be careful they don't walk in front of a train like I nearly did, or between the train and the platform or whatever, and everything. It's quite fun running peer care. I don't know if you guys find this, but running peer care groups for people with epilepsy is particularly interesting because, I remember trying to organize one of our get-togethers, and you'll get a call saying, "I'm sorry, I can't come. I've just been diagnosed with a brain tumor and I'm in the hospital." Or, "Sorry, I had a seizure yesterday. I can't come." Like, "But you were bringing the tea and coffee. It was like important." "Yeah, but I know, but I had a seizure yesterday." Like, I think that we all want peer care, but it's sometimes really like the challenge is that everyone has their own disability that they bring to the mix that makes it just that little bit more challenging. Like, I know, like, I don't know about you guys, but when you find organizing your peer stuff, you've got to deal with the cancellations because of someone's disability, and the fact that, so-and-so wants to socialize and can't understand why the person that has difficulty talking isn't socializing enough with them because person one has an intellectual disability and person two,
Yeah,
but
it's all about, encouraging others to be involved. Look, there are a lot of people just really out there that, are shy or don't have that confidence in, joining the group. So you invite them, I guess, try to encourage them to be involved, and you slowly build up their confidence to become involved. And look, small changes will happen over time, but they're good changes. And so that's why you want out of your peer groups, and you encourage them to come back for more. That's what we do with my organization. So it's good stuff.
No, I know you've invited me to some of your workshops on peer stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what we do, peer stuff. I think like you can start really simple. Like I just literally just like put up a Facebook page and said, "Hey, I'm meeting in a cafe. Does anyone want to come?" And like 2 or 3 people turned up, and that's where we started. And now we have like a pet care, like and yeah, I feel like our community doesn't really understand micro support as well.
Yeah.
So what other questions did you have?
Look, there are a lot of gaps that we need to, address, and I guess work with our community, to make it more inclusive and accessible for, people with disabilities. Let's move on to the next question. So, next question.
Well, so I don't know. You wanted to talk about ways to get so we'll get involved.
So we'll just
join the Jacaranda Club. Find us on Facebook.
So look, I'll just ask you a question. So what's the importance of peace support groups and people coming together in that space?
Well, I think it's really therapeutic for everyone. Like for me personally, starting the peer support group meant I didn't feel alone, and it meant that the worst things that happened to me became positives for other people, and that's very healing. I think that peer support groups can get things done that no one else can. Like I said, like my friend has just been injured. He's not really the system hasn't caught up yet, but we can all go around his house, knock on the door and say, "Hey," or like, the hospital isn't providing me with food that will actually stop my seizures when I'm there for seizures. So my friends show up with, or stuff like that, that I think Like, they can really fill in those gaps in the system. I think it's really important, like, to feel you're not alone, like that kind of level of stigma. I mean, like, you're a danger in our workplace just by existing, or, a lot of people with epilepsy there's a lot more control over their lives. Like, you can't, like, this happened to me at one workplace. Without my permission, they insisted on putting a security camera, like a surveillance camera, over my desk, despite my protests. And I swear the center of that damn thing was on my crotch the whole time. So I christened it Crotch Cam. And I'm like, I don't want to be on Crotch Cam. But they're like, oh, no, or they won't let you go places or do things. It was quite funny. When I wanted to go to Cambodia with the UN, I disclosed, and there were apparently people in the United Nations who didn't want me there. And the only reason I got there was I attached the Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities employment section to my disclosure. And so some of the human rights lawyers were like, guys, we can't do this. But apparently there were quite a few high-level people that were like, no, she can't come. She's epileptic. Mind you, if I'd fallen off, it was pretty dangerous, to be honest. But that's okay. But that level of constant control, and you're a danger and you're difficult, and we all go through it. And being around peers where it's like, meh, whatever. Yeah, okay. Like, it's not a big deal. Oh, you felt like, and frankly, I don't know about you guys, but the sense of humor thing is like a real split down the middle of the peer support groups. Like me, I'm one of those terrible people who just makes the worst jokes. And then half of the group thinks they're really funny, and half of the group's like, I remember there was one. Yeah, so I think humor really helps in peer support groups. I don't know what side of the fence do you guys fall on? The humor side or the
I fall on with the humor side. I'm always joking around. For anyone that knows me, I'm a clown.
Yes,
it's always good to have. It's always good to have that humor.
Yeah,
but it lightens up the room.
I think it's a lot easier in a peer context, and then you can just help with, really practical stuff like, oh, you need to go to hospital, and you're not fully together. Well, I remember that. Well, vaguely remember that happening, so I can walk you through it. Or you suddenly lost your license and you're not anywhere near. You're not anywhere near public transport. These are things I did to cope. I paid people's car insurance, for example, in exchange they would give me lifts and stuff like that. Yeah. And those sorts of tips that you can swap, or the classic, how did you get NDIS? Because that can be, nowadays you can get epilepsy on NDIS. Back then, for a good portion of it, you couldn't. No, because the NDIS, it was like they couldn't handle degenerative, like MND. Remember MND used to be because it wasn't permanent enough, you couldn't get that on the NDIS. Do you remember when that was? Yeah.
Is that motor neural disease?
Yeah, so those rapidly degenerative things you couldn't get on NDIS beginning too. So something that's dynamic, they kind of really struggled with at the beginning.
Interesting. No, thanks for that. Thanks for that advice, and tip. Look. On that note, is there any, I guess, final words or of advice to, I guess, in terms of epilepsy awareness that you'd like to share?
Well, I would think, just educate yourselves. Unfortunately, I remember in the center of Sydney, someone had a seizure, And I was like the only person there who knew how to give seizure first aid. Like,
Oh, really? Wow.
so there's people like don't actually know what they're talking about. And please, oh, here's a great idea. Please don't tell me that your cousin's dog has epilepsy. I honestly don't care.
Wow, really? You get compared to your cousin's dog?
Like, you know, they're like, you have epilepsy. And I'll be like, oh, my uncle's cousin's best friend's dog has epilepsy. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
I don't care.
Wow.
I really, really, really could. Oh, I see how hard it is for my dog. And I'm like, well, that's nice. Like, oh, you don't like taking
Look,
Ketra. Well,
epilepsy. Many people have epilepsy.
they do.
Many
1
people
in
have
10
epilepsy,
people.
but you don't know who has it.
No, you don't. 1 in 10 people will experience a seizure in their lifetime, but not all of those have epilepsy. It's about 1 in 50 people, I think. I think people also get very confused because, like, you know, even in a disability context around disabled people who are very hyper-aware disabled people have said things to me like, my friend has epilepsy and she drives. And I'm like, well, good for your friend. Guess what? I don't. Like, because 50% of people with epilepsy get full seizure control with medication. So, yes, they have epilepsy, but it's not really that big a disability for them as long as they take their meds. But the other 50% don't. And they'll have really varying levels of disability depending on how often their seizures are, what type of seizures they have, you know, what the side effects of their medication are. Lots of medication for epilepsy has terrible side effects. I had horrific mental health side effects from one of my medications. I think be aware that it affects women differently.
EBD.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that bit. Like, I don't really care that your dog has epilepsy. That would be a really important takeaway.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the insight, Hannah. Jonathan, do you have any, I guess, final words or thoughts?
Not every person with epilepsy is the same.
Yes, not everyone is the same.
Definitely.
Everyone has
But
diverse
especially with
abilities.
no, but I think that's something like, because it's the brain, especially, like, it's especially, I don't know, does anyone here know what they mean when you're dealing with medical and health professionals? And I call it the human dartboard effect, where they're just like, you know,
what do you mean by that?
well, it's like, let's see if that treatment works. I don't know if it really will, but we'll just chuck it out.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
has anyone else been through that?
Yes.
Yeah, the human dartboard effect, I call it. Like, people without disabilities, they think the doctors know everything, and then they acquire a disability and they're like, wow, they know nothing. I'm like, yeah, human dartboard effect. They're just going to chuck it at you and hope it sticks.
Interesting connection there. David, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, epilepsy is a disability that is not very, very visible, and we shouldn't judge people if we do not know their disabilities.
So
Now,
true. So
people should not be quick to judge what someone can or can't do, and be very well respective of people.
Yep.
So
Thank you for that,
don't be
David.
quick to judge, And
Yep.
if you have if you have any disabilities, please tell your friends before anything happens to you what to do and
Oh, yeah.
what signs to look out for.
Yeah, it's always good to be, disability aware. Uh, yeah, look, it's good to, just to ask if you need any, I guess, assistance or is there anything I can help you with, and just go from there. Uh, look, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Hannah, for coming on the show once again and sharing your insights on epilepsy. I've learned a lot of things just from this conversation. And it's always a pleasure to have you come back and tell us more about, ongoing management of people with epilepsy. Thank you once again, Hannah.
Thank you. Good
You've
to
been
see
watching
you all.
CripChat. You're waiting for us on every disability. Join us next week. And there's a